I mean, I still say to people who come and ask me for MBA advice, I tell them, forget MBA. Take that $200,000 if you're going to do MBA at a top school and use it for doing your startup. I'm a big fan of that. So that's the advice I would have given to my younger self, to take that risk.
Hi everyone. Hello and welcome to the Nails and Hammers podcast with our guest Selvam Velmurugan. We talk about Selvam's career journey and talk about what he learned from Jeff Bezos at Amazon, Reed Hastings at Netflix, Sri Vishwanath at Groupon, and finally from the legendary Paul Allen at Vulcan. We then pick his brain and know more about Selvam as a person, and I hope you enjoy listening to this conversation as much as I enjoyed recording it. Hi Selvam, welcome to the Nails and Hammers podcast.
Thank you, Kushal.
So I want to start from the very beginning. Can you share a bit with us about where did you grow up and where all did you study?
Sure, yeah. So I grew up in Chennai. It's in South India. And after doing my bachelor's in Gindi Engineering College, that's in Chennai, I came to US to do my master's at the University of Georgia in Athens.
Okay. So then you worked at Intel right after your master's, and then you joined Amazon after a year. So what made you join Amazon at that time?
It was just a lucky break. It was Amazon in 98 was pretty much unknown. And I was in the Bay Area working at Intel. The one thing I wanted, that I knew when I was working at Intel, was I wanted to go to a company where software is the primary focus. So within a year at Intel, I came to this realization. We all know, right? It's a hardware company, but as a graduate student, when you get into an opportunity like big organization like Intel, you just take it up. But then the reality is software engineers are not as highly valued as hardware engineers. So I wanted to move out of Intel. So I looked at different startups, including Netscape, Marimba, a few other startups at that time, and got into those along with Jungly, which was a small startup based in the Bay Area. I joined Jungly, and it's just a lucky break. It got bought by Amazon.
Yep.
Maybe just 2 weeks after I joined Jungly, literally got an offer letter, and then it got bought by Amazon. That's how I ended up in Amazon.
Oh, nice. So how different was Amazon back then?
Oh, it's... and I can only talk about the difference of Amazon from 98 to 2008, because Amazon has grown since I left Amazon in 2008 as well. So what I say as Amazon now might be different than what you might see in reality. But by the time I left Amazon in 2008, it was naturally very different than what it was in 98, because it was just in 3 categories. I think books, music, video, and they were just getting into electronics. There was no marketplace, there was no Kindle, there was no AWS, and they were just burning cash too much. And I really enjoyed the first 5 to 6 years of my experience at Amazon. Truly scrappy. And then, of course, the team I was in, as you now realize, with large companies, there will be cultures and subcultures. And thankfully, I got into this group called Search Group, which had some amazing engineers. A lot of them are now either at Google or still at Amazon or in other good places. I got to learn. I think I was probably one of the 2 junior engineers out of a team of, say, a dozen or 14 people. So I learned a lot from that.
So what did Bezos do so right?
I think really thinking about the long term and identifying those core long-term tenets. For example, customer service. Excellent customer. At no point people would not say, I don't want better customer service. At no point people will say, I want higher price. They won't say, give me lesser selection. I think just identifying the core tenets and making sure you are sticking to it. I think that is, it's as simple as it sounds. This is where, how do you build your whole organization against the simple tenets and making sure people think around it? I think that's his strength. Obviously, there are so many things. They're naturally one of the best leaders in the world, so I can't talk about all his strengths, but I feel that is one of the core things that he got it set Amazon on the right path.
So in one of your interviews, you also mentioned something about a virtuous loop. So Bezos created a virtuous loop where there's best customer service, there's best selection, cheapest price, and this flywheel goes on and on.
Yeah, exactly. And that's his the virtuous feedback loop, right? Like a Hot Wheel. And yeah, a lot of other companies are also trying to do that. But yeah, that's exactly. And he used to share that at all hands. So it's kind
Oh.
of imprinted in all our memories.
Mhm. Then you and your wife went to Amazon Chennai, and you were one of the first engineers there. So how did that happen?
So when I went to Amazon Chennai, so just I went there as a team lead. So that was the time I was shifting. So I
Hmm.
wanted to be an engineer for forever because I
Hmm.
loved just this idea of creating something, just you and the problem. After 5 6 years in the search team, I felt okay. I need to set a vision for, because at that time some of my managers were not having that vision. I mean,
Hmm.
great engineers, but sometimes not all engineers get to turn into good team leads or good managers.
Hmm.
So I went into management, and just a year after being a manager, I got this opportunity to go to India. So when I went there, I went to set up the retail side of retail systems team there.
Hmm.
So the experience there was very unique because by then Amazon was pretty stable. It was
Hmm.
not this startup where people might wonder, will it go bankrupt? So it was pretty stable, and they've already proven that the model works. I think this is 2004 or sometime is when we showed that, okay, it's possible to actually show profits once you have had certain capital investment in your fulfillment centers or whatnot. So it was like a startup experience because I was the first person to get hired, and my
Hmm.
wife also got hired to set up Kindle. And we were setting it up. So it's a true startup experience in India, but with
Hmm.
all the backing of this amazing organization. And by then, also, Amazon had this nice processes all built in. I mean, we had this OP planning mechanisms, the fitness functions, two pizza teams. So we took a lot of these templates and ideas. So it was a good mix and match of a startup experience because there was enough challenges in
Hmm.
building a brand for Amazon in a kind of city like Chennai, where people might have heard of Google or maybe Microsoft at that time. And it was hard to attract talent for a company like Amazon in Chennai. So we had those challenges, but then we had this backing of this organization and all the templates and even the systems. By then, Amazon was beginning to service-oriented architecture already.
Hmm.
So we got all these benefits, but some interesting challenges to solve.
Hmm. So since you mentioned hiring, how did you hire people in India?
I'm thinking, is there anything unique in the way we went about it? Let me just walk through what we did and then see if there is anything unique that stands out, because it almost seems to me like a standard template for most
Hmm.
organizations that go into a new location. We started building relationships with the top engineering colleges,
Hmm.
the IIT, and then College of Engineering India, and a few other colleges in and around the city. So the first thing we did is we went to these campuses, gave presentations and talks to make sure we were able to attract them for the upcoming year. And then we did huge recruitment drives, and these are all to get it bootstrapped. Challenge with actually then continuing with the hiring and retaining folks was really to make sure they understand the Amazon business model and what the organization stands for and what are the things that they can learn by coming to an organization like Amazon. Because as I highlighted, Amazon was not a recognized name in India because they did
Hmm.
not have a presence in India at that time. Whether the challenge was making to get people to experienced folks to come and join a company like Amazon. So we had to tell that story of as an organization, what are Amazon's tenets and principles, and how it's changing the e-commerce landscape, and what you will learn by coming to an organization. So those were some of the challenges I vividly recall, and that's the time when most of the talent pool were in consulting companies because there was
Hmm.
not a lot of product organizations or startups in India in 2005. Right? Microsoft probably had a big office in Hyderabad. Outside of that, there were not organizations that had big offices in India. So you have to go hire this mid to high end talent from, let's say, from companies like Infosys or Wipro, and you wouldn't find them there because
Hmm.
most of the time, after several years, people move into leadership roles, meaning
Yeah.
engineers, the path they want to take is go into some management role after just a few years.
Hmm.
So if you want to hire even a senior software engineer or let alone a principal engineer, that was not possible
Hmm.
because very unlikely somebody with that experience would be an IC.
Oh.
Those were
Okay.
some of the challenges. So the first 2 years, we ended up hiring only 60 engineers for the first two
Hmm.
years. But I'm glad to say right now, of all the people that we hired in Chennai, Chennai has grown tremendously well. And I would say right now, I can easily count 7 to 8 directors,
Oh.
engineers
Mhm.
who we had hired. They've all gone to become directors, like
Oh.
78 directors from that original pool of people.
Oh, nice. And also, Amazon stresses a lot about bar raisers. So, was there a challenge to have a bar raiser and to hire in a limited pool?
The goal was to make sure we are only hiring people who are aligned with both the core principles and have
Mhm.
the core skills along with the functional skills that we need. Um, and I happened to be a bar raiser. I just turned into a bar raiser before I went to,
Mhm.
or just after I moved to India. So I got involved in a lot of hiring for the last my 3 years of my career at Amazon. I did a lot of bar raiser interviews, um, and as you probably might have heard, bar raisers you don't typically be a bar raiser for within your team or even your neighboring team. It's usually any
Mhm.
team that wants to hire you, you are offering your services. Um, Having both been a bar raiser and used bar raisers, sometimes it is challenging because you feel this is a great person for the team, but if the bar raiser may not agree, but then you have to see from that point of view that
Mhm.
they're not looking at it's. I feel it's an amazing practice because you're not looking at it from your own point of view. You're looking at it from a company perspective,
Mhm.
and as Amazon's success shows, I think that works really well.
Mhm. And what made you come back?
So when we moved to India, we decided it was a 2 year term.
Mhm.
So because both me and my wife moved down there, we decided at that time, hey, it's going to be 2 years to set it up, and then we'll come back here. So we kept our home. So in retrospect, yeah, maybe we could have kept it more open. Then we might have continued to stay, but we just decided, hey, it's 2 years. And also at that time, given where our careers were, it felt to be closer to the headquarters, you're going to
Mhm.
have more opportunities.
Mhm.
So
And then when you left Amazon, you joined Disney, worked there for a while, and then you joined Netflix. What was different about the Netflix culture back then?
actually, very quickly after Amazon, I left Amazon to start my own nonprofit. And I ran it for 2 years. And then after that, I decided to go back to full time. And that's when Disney and Netflix happened.
Mhm.
Um, so Netflix culture, in many ways, at a meta level, very similar. Like innovation, customer focus. I think Netflix is also one of the top customer focused companies in the world.
Mhm.
If you look at the ASCI index, both Netflix, Amazon are always on top. But probably the couple of things that stands out is Netflix at that time. I'm not sure if it has changed. Was pretty much focused on only hiring senior engineers or senior talent. Typically, I mean, roughly they say that, hey, anyone who's 8 to 10 years of experience, and that went well with their culture. If you had an opportunity to read the culture deck that
Mhm.
Reed Hastings, and then I think it is Patty, who was the HR leader at that time, they had put together. It's about freedom and responsibility. The Netflix truly walked the talk about giving enough responsibility and freedom to people and not try to micromanage, both at the engineering level, management level. All right. So what that naturally meant is you want to hire people with certain level of natural functional skills and core skills and emotional intelligence, maturity. So they focused on hiring mainly people with 8 plus or 10 years
Mhm.
plus experience. So that stood very different than an Amazon like environment where we hired a lot of junior talent from colleges and campuses and where you find amazing raw potential and grow them. So that was one unique thing. And then second, Netflix also did not have as many templates or mechanisms or processes like Amazon did. That is not to say Amazon was bureaucratic or heavily process oriented, right? It's still very agile, super innovative. I feel Amazon has a good set of processes that has worked for them as an organization, but Netflix, because Reed's philosophy was you want to be an organization that's very agile, and whenever you set some processes, changing to the industry becomes hard. If the industry changes, then because your processes becomes the end opposed to the means. Because
Mhm.
um, so they were, for example, simple examples. There won't be any debriefs for Netflix interviews. I was so used to, as a bar raiser, I was like, I need to have debriefs to talk to people and hear everybody's point of view. Netflix, there was no debrief. It's just, as a hiring manager, you go talk to everyone individually and you make a decision.
Mhm.
It works for them. And so there were some few interesting changes. That's where I think it works for the culture that you set up. Having said that, if I were to take that and then plump it into a different organization, it would not work,
Mhm.
because that worked in Netflix because of that freedom and responsibility culture they built. That kind of no debrief works. If I say no debrief in a startup, I think it'll go haywire and we'll be having different talents pool all over the place.
Yeah. And Netflix was almost dead in 2011, and it's one of the leaders in the video streaming industry today. So why do you think that happened?
Majority, I wouldn't say all, goes to Reed Hastings' vision. And I have to tell you this reason I joined Netflix. So I did, when I was at Amazon, I did a diploma in filmmaking at UW.
Mhm.
Because filmmaking has been a long time interest of mine, to the extent where I want to learn about filmmaking.
Mhm.
And I did this course for 1 year and I made a film and all. So the reason I went to Netflix was I thought it's a great match of two of these interests,
Mhm.
technology and then films. And Netflix was just getting into producing their own originals at that time in 2011. So when I met Reed Hastings for the first time, I told him I'm a big fan of his and how he had cannibalized the business, the DVD business, where
Mhm.
Netflix was doing amazingly well, and then moving it into streaming over the net. And I think a lot of Netflix success comes from his vision and his willingness to actually go the length to get his ideas. When Netflix came, I think what, 97, 98, maybe around that time. If I'm not mistaken, his thinking was at some point it's going to be a streaming company, but
Mhm.
we don't have that band infrastructure, so we'll start with DVD. So I think that's again goes to the vision of the leader. I think that's one. And one more quality of Reed Hastings. Again, he has amazing, a lot of great qualities as any other leader. But one of the things is, when I joined Netflix, that 2 weeks into it, that's when they decided to do the split.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if you probably were tracking at that time. This is a little while ago. They
Mhm.
wanted to split Netflix into two companies, one called Quickster for the
Right.
DVD business and another for Netflix for streaming.
Mhm.
And that became a big flop. People backlashed and they had to then and I remember a meeting that we had with Reed Hastings, with all the directors and VPs and Reed, and how openly he acknowledged it was his mistake, and how he thought he was arrogant. He used the word, I was so
Oh.
arrogant, I thought I could not make a mistake, because he had just been named the Fortune CEO of the year, like in 2010 or 2011. Now that we know, we are going to make this right. And that time when Netflix was $4 billion in market cap,
Mhm.
and today if you look at it, it's 180. Last I
Yeah.
checked, it's just in last 8-9 years, 4 to 180 billion. That's an amazing story.
Mhm. And you also mentioned about filmmaking earlier. So is that still a hobby that you want to pursue further?
Not right now, I think I got over it. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that was my passion even from my college, my undergraduate days. And then I went to do that. I did movies. I actually dabbled in it even after I left Amazon. I dabbled in it, but then I came to a point where it felt that is not something I'm so excited about to spend as much time and energy as other things that I'm excited now.
Mhm. You earlier mentioned about starting a non-profit. So how did the Emoksha story happen?
So there were two things that probably laid the triggers for, yeah, foundation for the Emoksha. One, during my stint for Amazon in India in 2006 and 2007, I was mentoring a couple of college kids, and and they wanted to just get some experience with coding and doing some project because they were applying for masters here in the US. So I told them about to build a website where people could do complaints about issues in their locality and take it to corporation. So it felt okay, there might be an opportunity to bring technology to make some kind of change in the society and in the real world. because the technology that I was using at Amazon at that time was so well advanced. We were doing so much cool things, and AWS had just come in place. And when you looked at the technology, and this is pre-iPhone times. I know it's hard to imagine
Yeah.
pre-iPhone, but 2006, 2007, there was no smartphones. We wanted to see, can we use technology to do something to make democracies and societies work better? So that was one idea that kind of sprung from that experience, which I put it on the back burner. And then second, when I after my stint in India and I came to US, that I was nearing 10 years of completing my career at Amazon, 10 years at Amazon, and I'd done so much interesting stuff at Amazon, doing search and helping with setting up the Chennai center and working in AWS. It felt there won't be a dearth of interesting things forever. I mean, I can continue to
Mhm.
do more and more interesting things at Amazon or other places. But then I was questioning, is that all that you want from your life?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
just solving interesting problems. Is that okay? For many people, it's okay. I mean, there is no right and wrong. I felt at that time, okay, this is not something that's I want to be. I love that intellectual challenge. I still do because
Mhm.
to keep me occupied once in a while to solve a problem. But I was very convinced that okay, solving interesting problems is not something that I want to do the rest of my life.
Mhm.
I want to really understand other things that's more dear to me. One manifestation of that is okay, how can you use technology for a more tangible benefit to society? So I think
Mhm.
those two came into play, and
Mhm.
then I quit Amazon abruptly. So I made a decision in September and I quit in October. Surprised a lot of my team and then my family, my friends, and then started Emotion. Yeah.
Mhm. So, why did it not work out?
So I think Emoksha, when I started it, I wanted to set a goal to say some criteria to know can I continue on it. And one criteria was in 18 to 24 months, I wanted to have enough funding or some kind of revenue to earn a reasonable living. Of course,
Mhm.
not what a technology company would pay
Yeah.
you, but then as a reasonable living to sustain. So in terms of the impact with ability where we launched election monitoring in half a dozen countries in India and in Lebanon and Sudan and Panama. And we built a software as a service platform that got used by many other nonprofit organizations. There was a good amount of impact, but then it didn't turn to be sustainable. And we got some grants as well. We got a couple of
Mhm.
grants, but they were enough to just hire maybe a small set of volunteer program managers who to help manage the programs
Mhm.
in India and other places. So when it got to that place, then I realized, okay, so I need to get into fundraising. I think the big part that got a realization was, okay, you need to start doing fundraising. Unless you are very wealthy, where you are spending your own resources, you have to get better at fundraising. A lot of nonprofits, majority of the time, what they're doing is just fundraising, and they probably even have campaign managers or fundraisers who they have to hire to do this fundraising. And
Yeah.
to me, that was like my mind is not I wasn't excited about that aspect of spending my energy and time in fundraising.
Mhm.
So that combined with the fact that I also liked working with larger teams because I was doing most of this individually.
Yeah.
So then I went back to full time. Yeah.
And then you went on to work at Groupon after you left Netflix.
Yeah.
So, how was that experience like?
I really enjoyed the Groupon experience for a few reasons. One, so the way it happened was one of my colleagues from Amazon, Vinayak, so he started the Groupon Dev Center here, and then he pinged me, and around that time, we decided we don't want to move to the Bay Area. Netflix
Mhm.
was an amazing company, and everything was going well, but I was traveling back and forth. I go on Monday and come back on a Friday, and as then once we decided we're not ready to move to the Bay Area, then it didn't make sense to continue doing that hectic
Mhm.
travel schedule, not being at home any week. So that time, Vinayak saw me on a flight, and then it just so happened. Then Groupon was starting here. Then I joined Groupon. That was the first my first experience in computational marketing. So I
Mhm.
had done prior to that search, catalog, retail systems, pricing systems, account billing, communications, a lot of different areas I worked in, but I never worked in marketing, SEO, SEM, CRM kind of system. So that to me was a great experience, and it was great working with Vinayak on that. And then the second half of my tenure at Groupon, which also is one of my best experiences, is working closely with Sri Viswanath, who came in as the CTO for Groupon at that time. And amazing leader, amazing person. I think he's one of the role models that you can look up in terms of somebody who's empathetic, down to earth, help set a vision and give you that freedom. So I really enjoyed working in Sri's org, and that's when I went to Chennai again to set up the not set up, the team is already there, but to build the technology and product organization around APAC.
Mm-hmm. And then you joined Vulcan. So how did that happen?
When I went to India for Groupon, I was very clear I can't be more than a year because my elder one is going to high school. Mm-hmm. And it was with all the prior knowledge, Sri and everybody agreed that yes, it's okay, because we want to get that stabilization to build that core infrastructure and move all these different countries into the same platform. So once I moved back and I was helping Groupon help move into AWS, because Groupon was fully into their own data centers. So I was working, how do you get them into the cloud? And around that time, I think this is the time Sri left Groupon. So he went to Atlassian. And Groupon was going through a good amount of changes at that time at the leadership level. Eric left, Sri left, and I would say there was a time when, during my tenure there, I'd also highlighted that Groupon is going towards a brick wall. Mm-hmm. Because they were focusing more on physical goods as opposed to local commerce. The physical goods was becoming a distraction, and I talked about it to all the leaders there, between Vinayak and then with Rich and a few other people. But once, as an organization, once you get used to revenue, it's hard to wean yourself out of that revenue. And goods was a very easy way to get revenue. It's just all cheap stuff, right? What you get in the flea market, and you're just getting revenue through it. But then that's not a vision. Local commerce would have been a great vision, I think, which they pivoted in the last year or two, but it's too late, in my opinion. So I was also getting a little unhappy with the vision where Groupon was heading. And that's the time Shannon Anderson, who was a recruiter, so she pinged me about this opportunity. And I was not ready to move anywhere, because I had really amazing time because even with these challenges, I had really good experience working with Vinayak and then with Rich and all the other leaders there in Groupon. So I was not planning to leave, but when this opportunity came along to work with Paul Allen and leading the philanthropic technology for his organization, that seems like such a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And it also kind of took me back to my nonprofit days. So I felt, okay, this is a good match, because one of the reasons I left Emocash or ended it and went back to full-time was fundraising was a challenge. But I always believe technology is one of the key ways to bring about these changes in society or environment or whatever challenges that we are facing as humanity. And here is a guy who has the resources and the will and the motivation, and I can bring my technology and organizational skills. So that's how I got excited about Vulcan, and then I joined Vulcan.
How is it like to work with Paul Allen?
There is nothing that I would say that's going to add any more credibility than others have said in the world, right? He's obviously one of the amazing visionaries and leaders in the world. But personal experience that I found is he's truly somebody who's excited about technology. When you're in meetings, and he doesn't like big meetings. He's what you might call like maybe the introvert, right? I am an introvert in many ways too, but he likes people, maybe like 5 to 6 people, not more than that, very short meetings. So you get to really interact with them in those meetings. So I found it very interesting. And he really gets excited about technology and solving new problems. So it was very fascinating to see how his thinking goes and how he gets excited about these new ideas, and very down to earth. My manager at that time, who was the CTO for Vulcan, so he actually aptly told he is a gentle soul, which I thought is a very good description of who he is, Paul Allen. So he's a very gentle soul. So I really liked both as a person and the kind of ideas that he brought to the table.
So what different projects did you work on at Vulcan?
So my team was responsible for all the technology initiatives on the philanthropy side, and we worked on a variety. I mean, I would say maybe 7 to 8 different initiatives at different scales and different maturity levels. I would point maybe two that are very mature and that have been put out into the world successfully. One was what we called at that time as a domain awareness system. This system has helped to reduce poaching of wildlife in African parks.
Mhm.
And so we launched it when I was there. So the system was getting built while I joined, and then we built it, and then we launched it in a park in Kenya. So by the time I left, we had it in dozen parks. So that's one of the big success stories. It's
Mhm.
basically an operational war room that pulls in information from your collaring of animals, the IoT devices that's embedded in the rangers and vehicles, sensors, and pulling all that together and building some simple statistical modeling and learning on top to know where to actually pay attention, and integrating that with drone system for tactical surveillance or tactical reconnaissance or persistent surveillance. So it was a full-fledged system. So and it gave me a completely different view of all the e-commerce and all the different systems I built and launched. This was like a completely different set of problems and systems. So it was fascinating to launch it in a dozen parks over the time I spent there. That's one. The second one, it's now called Skylight. It's basically a platform that we built to monitor illegal fishing around the world. And again, pulling information from different data sources and providing a kind of a dashboard that has all the machine learning behind it, including satellite imagery. How do you build automatic detection of illegal fishing vessels using satellite imagery? And then providing that data, overlaying that with the MPAs, the marine protection territories, exclusive economic zone overlays, and then automatically triggering alerts to the appropriate port authorities. So that's, if I'm not mistaken, that's now actually getting used in countries where countries are paying for that system. This is
Mhm.
one of the best examples
Oh.
where you built a platform and now you make it sustainable, where because they find it useful enough to pay for the service.
So technology and social good can get sustainable if someone has to work on it.
That's the utopian thing. In this case, it has come, but I'm not sure if it has broke even. They're willing to pay. You see, there are many levels of
Mhm.
success for a technology solution in this in a non-profit world. Somebody willing to use itself is one level of success,
Mhm.
because as you know, other non-profits and government organizations, they are all so strained for resources. For them to go use a new system and to dedicate time and effort to train people, that itself is a big deal. So that's the
Mhm.
first level. Second, paying something, whether even if it is not going to break even, right? Paying something that shows, okay, next level. If you really feel okay, you're able to break even. I'm not sure Skylight is breaking even now.
Mhm.
I'm not sure, because it's been 2 years or 2 3 years now since I left Vulcan. But they were willing to pay, or they were paying. I think that's probably the next. I don't know if it is breaking even.
Now I want to focus on Selvam as a person. So what do you do to unwind?
So two things. My hobbies, movies is still one of my big hobbies. Not making anymore, but I watch. I love South Korean movies. I've
Mhm.
been a big fan for the last 10 years. So I watch South Korean dramas and thrillers, and old Japanese movies. I'm not a big fan of new Japanese movies. Old Japanese in the 50s, 60s era. This is
Mhm.
Kurosawa, Hiroshi Inagaki, Ozu. I mean, these are famous directors at that time. Criterion channel is one of my favorite channels, and then of course Netflix and Prime Video. So that's one way to unwind. And then I've been doing meditation for almost close to now 2 decades now. So that's another way for me to unwind.
Mhm. Do you meditate every day?
I used to do it every day in the past, maybe 10 years ago. And then it became like whenever I felt like it. But now, over the last month, I've made it a practice to do it twice a day. So I've
Oh.
been, I've been able to do it twice a day because I do the Vipassana,
Mhm.
which I started in 2015. I don't know. This is one of the silver lining of the situation we are going through. I mean, there's so much trouble and problems people are going through. That's all need to be solved. But there are some silver linings or some things that's interesting that's coming out of the situation. One is there is group sittings, virtual group sittings that Vipassana has started, and it's such a boon. So I've been doing it twice a day, 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the evening,
Oh,
virtually. Yeah. So
nice. You also studied Buddhism in between. So what was that about?
I started doing meditation in 2001, and and when I was in India in 2006 and seven, while I was at Amazon, so that's when I went to a Buddhism course in Bodh Gaya to learn more about Buddhism, because Buddhism has preserved a lot of mechanisms and techniques. I mean, in the end, there are the philosophy of all the Eastern religions are the same.
Mhm.
Because they're all having similar roots. Jainism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism all have those same roots, but some have developed certain methodologies and techniques, and they've been preserved through the ages, because especially Tibetan Buddhism been preserved because of the inaccessibility to those areas. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to go and learn those techniques, and that ties in with to the earlier question to what you asked. I was also thinking about what I want to do with my life. Is it just solving more interesting problems, or trying to understand the biggest problem of all, the existential
Mhm.
problem? So that is what I'm very fascinated about in general. To me, that is probably the problem truly worthy to be solved by every person in the world, to whatever extent you can, and that's my current passion.
So would you call yourself restless?
You are, yeah. I am very restless. I don't know if it's schizophrenic or dichotomy. So when I'm meditating, I can be, especially in Vipassana, they actually tell you not to move and all that. So I'm very comfortable with that, because I've done. Thankfully, I'm not boasting. Sorry if I come across
Yeah.
boasting. Sorry about that. It's not. It just comes. I don't have to pressurize myself to actually not move and all that. It just, I can do that. But I'm restless outside of meditation. I'm restless where I get so bored with things. That's one of the things when I go solve problems. When I work at a place, I get, after a year or two, you feel like, okay, you're seeing the same problems in different manifestations. Then the question is, okay, this is just a similar kind of problem that you've solved in the past in another place. So how do you get excited? So I get restless in that sense.
Mhm.
The way I try to rationalize this, that restlessness is probably all leading to understanding about yourself, because it's okay to get restless about the periphery of things if it is helping to lead you to understand yourself in a more fundamental way.
So is that one of the reasons why you stayed at Amazon for 10 years and not at other places for so long?
I've not deconstructed that yet. Why that is? There are so many parameters in it, because Amazon, I was young, and also within Amazon, 10 years, I had 14 managers in 10 years. Amazon was going through a whirlwind of changes internally. As I said, it was with three categories. It went into more categories, and obviously then into software as a service, into marketplaces, Kindle, AWS, and as a team where I was part of, we were also going through so many changes internally. So it felt, those 10 years didn't feel like static at all to me. I guess maybe in other places, those changes might not be as interesting as Amazon, or it could be because I was young and I did not have that kind of restlessness that I have now.
Mhm.
So maybe I don't know. I have not deconstructed that.
Mhm. What are your thoughts on the two body problem? Both you and your wife are very successful in your respective careers. So is it a challenge to find opportunities?
I think grateful. I mean, this is one of the things. We got into this technology space without giving so much thought into it, but then it's become one of these best opportunities to grow and work on interesting problems. So I don't find dearth of opportunities for either my wife or me. It is managing that along with our normal life. It's so easy to get sucked into that and dedicate so much time and effort. As you know, I mean, working at Amazon or any of the top companies, you could spend all your waking time minute in solving those problems we have in your teams and all that, right? But how do you then carve out time to dedicate time? And we have two kids. One, my elder one is now in college, my younger one is going to high school. And how do you find time for family and doing other interesting things? Because that brings richness to life. It gives a different perspective on your problems that you're solving as well.
Mhm.
So I think that to me is the bigger problem than finding opportunities from my experience.
Mhm. And lastly, what advice would you give to a 25-year-old Selvam today?
I would say to have taken risk with starting something while I had the motivation, because I remember vividly thinking of doing a startup, especially a marketplace idea in '99.
Mhm.
This is when Rakuten in Japan was just getting started, and
Mhm.
around that time we had this idea for doing market. I mean, just one example. I'm not saying that is
Mhm.
one idea. That would be something I would have probably I would give an advice that it's when you're young, you can obviously take that risk and then go run with it. And the amount of learning you get from doing a startup experience. I mean, I still say to people who come and ask me for MBA advice, I tell them, forget MBA.
Mhm.
Take that $200,000 if you're going to do MBA at a top school and use it for doing your startup.
Mhm.
I'm a big fan of that. So that's the advice I would have given to my younger self, to take that risk.
Thank you so much, Selvam, for being the guest on the podcast. And I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
Oh, I did. Yeah. Thank you. Very interesting questions. Thank you, Kushal.